The invasion of Norway and Denmark, World War II, 1940. Operation Weserübung, April 9, 1940. A fog-drenched fjord. A royal aide wakes King Haakon VII with trembling words, "Majesty, we are at war." The king blinks, bewildered. Against whom? Thus begins a tale of missed warnings, vanished opportunities, and a blitzkrieg that crashed through the Scandinavian ice before the Allies even finished breakfast. This video dives deep into one of World War II's most daring operations, Operation Weserübung, the German invasion of Norway and Denmark, where snowstorms masked destroyers, torpedoes misfired under polar skies, and a forgotten destroyer named Glowworm lit up the sea in a final blaze of glory. How did a storm become Germany's secret weapon? Why did Britain misread every signal like a bad date? What role did a failed Norwegian fascist play in this icy theater? Who paid the price when destroyers clashed in Narvik's frozen fjord? Whether it's dive-bombing firsts, airfield heists by paratroopers, or the chilling moment Hitler's puppet declared himself prime minister on live radio, this saga is dripping in suspense, irony, and historical whiplash. Subscribe and hit the because this is not just war. It's weather, whispers, and wild misjudgments. Let's unravel the operation that cracked neutrality and shook Europe's snowy north. In the spring of 1940, Europe was a chessboard of nerves and iron ore. The players? Britain, France, and Nazi Germany. The prize? Norway and Denmark. Two neutral nations caught between the ambitions of empires and the icy grip of geopolitics. Germany's war machine was hungry, specifically for Swedish iron ore, which flowed through the Norwegian port of Narvik like lifeblood. In winter, the Baltic froze, making Narvik Germany's only reliable artery. If Britain could cut it off, Hitler's tanks might run dry. Meanwhile, Britain and France were eyeing Norway not just for its resources, but for its strategic coastline. Control of Norway meant control of the North Sea, a dagger pointed at Germany's naval ambitions. By early April 1940, both sides were poised to act. Britain had Operation Wilfred ready, a plan to mine Norwegian waters and provoke a German response. But Germany, sensing the trap, decided to flip the board. Hitler approved Operation Weserübung, Weser exercise, a daring high-risk invasion of both Norway and Denmark. The goal? Occupy both nations simultaneously, from Narvik in the Arctic north to Copenhagen in the south, before the Allies could react. To pull this off, Germany deployed 9 divisions total, 5 divisions to Norway, including the elite 3rd Mountain Division, 3 divisions to Denmark, over 500 Luftwaffe aircraft, the entire Kriegsmarine, including destroyers, cruisers, and U-boats, airborne troops to seize key airfields in Oslo and Stavanger. The plan relied on Blitzkrieg principles, speed, and surprise. If Denmark and Norway could be forced to surrender on day one, the Allies would be too late to intervene. But it was a gamble. The Kriegsmarine had to stretch its fleet across thousands of kilometers. If the British Royal Navy, stationed at Scapa Flow and Rosyth, caught wind of the plan, they could cripple Germany's naval power in a single blow. On March 4th, Germany began holding all ships and submarines in port. This was the moment of commitment. Every day the U-boats sat idle was a day lost in the Battle of the Atlantic. The invasion had to happen, and soon. The date was set April 9, 1940. The North Sea was restless. On the morning of April 7th, the British Royal Navy, under the looming shadow of war, launched Operation Wilfred, a bold move to lay mines off the Norwegian coast. 17 destroyers, cloaked by the battlecruiser Renown, surged forward to disrupt Germany's iron ore lifeline from Sweden. The goal? Force German merchant ships into international waters where the Royal Navy could pounce. But the British were already late to the party. Unbeknownst to the British, the Kriegsmarine had already set its plan in motion. 5 German task forces, each assigned to seize a key Norwegian port, had slipped out of harbor. The most ambitious of these, Task Forces 1 and 2, were racing north toward Trondheim and Narvik, 2 strategic gems nestled deep in Norway's icy fjords. At 5 a.m., under the command of Admiral Gunther Lutyens, a formidable fleet departed Wilhelmshaven. It was a show of force, unlike any other. The Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, Germany's only modern battleships, thundered through the waves alongside the heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper. 14 destroyers packed with 3,700 troops followed in their wake, slicing through the sea like wolves on the hunt. Back in Berlin, Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, head of the Kriegsmarine, was a man haunted by numbers. The British home fleet, anchored at Scapa Flow, was a Leviathan. Commanded by Admiral Sir Charles Forbes, it boasted capital ships like Rodney, Valiant, and Repulse, backed by 3 cruiser squadrons and additional reinforcements from the River Clyde. Raeder knew the odds. If the British caught wind of the operation, the German fleet could be annihilated before it ever reached Norway. At 9 a.m., a British reconnaissance plane spotted the German fleet. The alarm was sounded. By 1:30 p.m., 12 Bristol Blenheim bombers launched an attack. Though ineffective, the message was clear. The British knew. But then came the fatal flaw. The British Admiralty, interpreting the German fleet's movement as a breakout into the Atlantic, similar to the Graf Spey's rampage months earlier, miscalculated. They assumed the destroyers were escorting commerce raiders, not invasion troops. Despite evidence to the contrary, they dismissed the possibility of a full-scale invasion of Norway, especially one targeting ports as far north as Narvik. The British home fleet didn't leave port until 8:15 p.m., nearly 12 hours after the initial sighting. Worse still, they steamed northeast, aiming to intercept the Germans in the Atlantic, rather than heading southwest toward Norway. This misjudgment rippled through British strategy. The 2nd and 18th Cruiser Squadrons were deployed to the middle of the North Sea. The aircraft carrier, Glorious, and battleship Warspite were ordered to sail north from the Clyde. Most disastrously, Plan R4, the British plan to preemptively occupy key Norwegian ports, was abandoned. Winston Churchill himself ordered the 1st Cruiser Squadron to disembark its troops and join Forbes's fleet, sacrificing the chance to beat the Germans to Norway's strategic harbors. As the British chased phantoms in the Atlantic, German troops were already en route to Norway's doorstep. The misreading of German intentions crippled British decision-making at a moment when clarity was most needed. As the clock ticked toward midnight on April 7, 1940, the North Sea was a cauldron of chaos. The weather turned vicious, waves towered, visibility vanished, and both British and German fleets were scattered like chess pieces in a hurricane. But amidst the storm, a lone British destroyer was about to write her name into legend. HMS Glowworm, a G-class destroyer, had been detached from her squadron to search for a man lost overboard. In the early hours of April 8th, she stumbled into Task Force 2, a German naval group en route to Trondheim, led by the 18,000-ton heavy cruiser, Admiral Hipper. Outgunned and outclassed, Glowworm's captain, Lieutenant Commander Gerard Broadmead Roop, made a fateful decision. After radioing Hipper's position, he charged the cruiser head-on, firing torpedoes and laying smoke. Then, in a final act of defiance, he rammed Hipper, tearing off 100 feet of armor plating. Glowworm exploded and sank, but her bravery echoed across the waves. Roop was later posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross, the first of World War II, recommended by Hipper's own captain. Later that day, a British seaplane confirmed Hipper's position near Trondheim, but Admiral Charles Forbes, commanding the British home fleet, misread the situation. Believing the German ships were attempting a breakout into the Atlantic, he steered northeast, away from Norway, hoping to intercept them. Farther north, Rear Admiral William Whitworth, aboard the battlecruiser Renown, received reports of Glowworm's encounter. Convinced more German ships were heading west, he too turned away from Narvik, chasing shadows in worsening weather. But the Germans had already made their move. 10 destroyers carrying mountain troops approached Narvik under cover of darkness. They were met by 2 aging Norwegian patrol ships, Eidsvold and Norge. When the Norwegians refused to surrender, the Germans launched torpedoes. Eidsvold was obliterated, with only 8 survivors out of 184. Norge followed minutes later, sinking with over 100 men lost. At 1:30 a.m., in the royal residence near Oslo, King Haakon VII was roused from sleep by an aide with trembling urgency. The words were simple, but they shattered the silence like a gunshot. "Majesty, we are at war." The king blinked, still half in dreams. "Against whom?" he asked. The answer was already roaring toward his country in steel and fire. One man had seen it coming, Colonel Hottel, Chief of Staff of the Norwegian Army. Since April 5th, he had been pushing for full mobilization. But the government, clinging to neutrality and fearing provocation, refused. Norway's military was a paper tiger. 6 divisions on paper, capable of mobilizing 56,000 men, with a theoretical max of 100,000 using territorial reserves. In reality, no field exercises, no armor, no anti-tank weapons, no modern aircraft. Mobilization notices were sent by post, not radio or courier. General Christian Lake, the commander-in-chief, ordered only partial mobilization, further hobbling the response. As dawn broke on April 9th, the German war machine was already in motion, sweeping across Norway with a precision that stunned the world. But even the most meticulously planned invasion can unravel in the face of grit, geography, and a few well-placed torpedoes. Just hours behind schedule, Germany scored a major strategic win. Sola airfield near Stavanger was seized by paratroopers from the 1st Parachute Regiment, marking the first airborne operation in military history. With Sola being Norway's largest and most advanced airfield, the Luftwaffe now had a launch pad to dominate the skies over southern Norway. Meanwhile, Task Force 5, tasked with capturing Oslo before sunrise, met a fiery fate. The brand-new heavy cruiser Blucher, carrying troops and Gestapo agents, meant to seize the Norwegian government, sailed confidently into Oslo fjord, only to be ambushed by the aging but deadly Oscarsborg fortress. Shells and torpedoes from the fortress tore into Blucher, sinking her in the Battle of Drøbak Sound. The delay allowed King Haakon VII, the government, and Norway's gold reserves to escape inland. German troops had to land 50 miles south and march to Oslo, which was deserted by the time they arrived. It was a humiliating setback for Operation Weserübung, and a narrow escape for Norway's leadership. While Norway resisted, Denmark capitulated in just 3 hours. The German blitz was so swift that Danish forces barely had time to mobilize. By the end of April 9th, Germany controlled all major Norwegian ports and airfields, and Denmark was under occupation. Meanwhile, Task Forces 3 and 4, led by light cruisers Köln, Karlsruhe, and Königsberg, faced stiffer resistance in the south. At Bergen, Norwegian shore batteries damaged Königsberg, forcing her to retreat. At Kristiansand, Task Force 4 was repelled twice by coastal defenses, before Luftwaffe bombers cleared the way for Karlsruhe to land troops. The plan to seize Fornebu airfield hinged on paratroopers, but fog forced their squadron to turn back. Hermann Göring had ordered, if the paratroopers failed, abort the mission. But Captain Richard Wagner defied orders. His transport planes arrived anyway, though ground fire prevented landing. Lieutenant Werner Hansen, flying Bf-110S, landed and used his aircraft as mobile machine guns, driving off defenders. Stavanger Airport was taken, but a Norwegian destroyer sank most of the airborne unit's supplies. Bergen and Trondheim landings went more smoothly. At Kristiansund, fog and accurate coastal guns delayed landings. A German cruiser falsely claimed to be British-French, and the Norwegians, fooled by the French tricolor, let them in. Narvik was the riskiest target, but in bad weather, the Germans slipped past British patrols and landed successfully. The 3rd Mountain Division, Germany's best, secured the port. Taking Stavanger Airport proved crucial. German air power began to limit British operations immediately. Norway's rugged coastline is lashed by sleet and snow. The North Sea churns with icy fury, and visibility is near zero. For the German Navy, this is a gift from the heavens. The British home fleet, wary of the weather and fearing U-boat ambushes, hugs the shoreline. Their patrols are cautious, their reach limited. The Germans, cloaked in fog and storm, slip through the fjords like phantoms. In the early hours, the British battlecruiser HMS Renown encounters two German capital ships, Gneisenau and Scharnhorst, off the Norwegian coast. The sea is a cauldron of chaos. Snow squalls blind the gunners. Radar is primitive, but the ships engage. Renown lands hits on Gneisenau, damaging her forward turret. Gneisenau retaliates, striking Renown's rear turret, killing crewmen and forcing her to disengage. Scharnhorst, faster and more agile, maneuvers through the storm and breaks contact. The Germans, shielded by weather and speed, escape into the mist. The British, battered and bloodied, retreat. As the naval clash subsides, the Luftwaffe's 10th Air Corps descends upon Bergen. German bombers roar through the clouds, targeting British ships docked in the harbor. A British destroyer is sunk. A battleship and two cruisers are damaged. The harbor is ablaze. Smoke mingles with snow. The Germans now hold Bergen. By nightfall on April 9th, all major Norwegian ports, Oslo, Bergen, Trondheim, Narvik, are in German hands. The Blitzkrieg has moved from land to sea to sky with terrifying efficiency. The Germans, having seized key towns, also capture Norwegian mobilization centers, looting arms and ammunition. The resistance is disarmed before it can organize. The Norwegian government flees inland. Not far, just 50 kilometers, but enough to escape capture. Enter Vidkun Quisling, leader of the fringe fascist party National Samling. With barely 3% of the vote and no seats in parliament, he's a political ghost. But on April 9th, he goes live on national radio, declaring himself prime minister. Hitler gives his blessing. Quisling draws up a cabinet. He accuses the real government of cowardice, but the Norwegian people reject him. King Haakon VII refuses to appoint him, even under German pressure. "I'd rather abdicate," he says. The cabinet backs the king. Quisling is a pariah. Within days, the Germans begin phasing him out, planning a more palatable puppet regime. April 10th, Captain Warburton Lee leads 5 British destroyers into Narvik's fjords. 10 German destroyers lie in wait. The British sink 2 German ships. The Germans retaliate, sinking 2 British destroyers. Warburton Lee is killed in action. Both sides suffer heavy damage. That same day, British naval aircraft, Blackburn Skuas, dive-bombed the German cruiser Königsberg in Bergen Harbor. The cruiser is sunk. It's the first time a major warship is destroyed by dive bombing. A historic moment, but bittersweet. The British have only 1 aircraft carrier in the region. The rest are in the Mediterranean. Meanwhile, in London, a quiet revolution begins. The Maud Committee meets for the first time, exploring the feasibility of a nuclear weapon using uranium-235. Niels Bohr sends a cryptic telegram, "Tell Cockcroft and Madre Kent." It's not a code, just a message to physicist John Cockcroft and Bohr's housekeeper Madre from Kent. But the initials, MAUD, stick. A name is born. April 13th. The British return to Narvik with HMS Warspite and 9 destroyers. All 8 remaining German destroyers are sunk. The fjords are littered with wreckage. The German Navy is crippled in Norway. The British War Cabinet decides to land troops at Narvik, link up with Norwegian forces, and cross into Sweden to destroy the Gällivare iron mines, the lifeblood of the German war machine. While Norway burns, the Western Front is eerily quiet. British MP Ronald Cartland writes from France, "We've settled into a peaceful war existence. I give smart lunch parties and dine out twice a week in London. The contrast is stark. Norway is a battlefield. France is a dinner party. Norway, a neutral country, is invaded without provocation. Its cities bombed, its people killed, its sovereignty erased. Neutrality was supposed to protect it. It didn't." Coming up next, Battle of France, Fall of the West, May 10th to June 25th, 1940. What happens when Hitler barrels through the Ardennes, while French General Gamelin studies maps, and British General Gort wonders if tea time can fix an unraveling continent? Find out how 6 weeks flipped Europe, why Dunkirk became a miracle, and who made the blunders that echoed through history. Smash that subscribe button before history repeats itself.